Welcome, one and all, back to the Viper's Nest. So, over the last couple of videos, I've mostly been talking about stuff in the video games and entertainment industries that make me sad or angry and whatever. And people seem to like those videos well enough, which, that's cool. I appreciate it. But you know what? It's time to break the trend. So today, I'm going to talk about something that makes me happy. And that's two things. Number one, my dad. And number two, giant robots. So, to start this off, you need to know a little bit about my dad. And when I say my dad specifically, I mean Richard, the guy who adopted me and raised me. I do have another dad, my biological dad. He's still alive. We have a very good relationship. And he is a very fucking cool guy. I love him to death. He is an absolute gun nut. But just know that when I say my dad, 9 times out of 10, I'm talking about my adopted dad. So, my dad, Richard, he was well and truly one of the absolute greats. Like, a lot of people say that about their dads because they love their dads. I get it. No disrespect intended. But when I say my dad was one of the greats, that's kind of the objective truth. Like, anyone you meet who had the pleasure of meeting my dad in person will tell you the exact same thing. He was one of the greats. He was everything a good man should be. He was strong, tough, hardworking, stoic, but also kind and generous and compassionate, loved helping people, would work himself almost literally to death to help someone if they actually needed it. And sadly, he passed away back in 2014. But you know what? I got a good life with my dad, and I miss him every single day. But, I have a lot more good memories of him than I do bad, because basically I have no bad memories of my dad. That's just how it was. So, me and my dad, we worked in a machine shop most of my life, and pretty much all of his, a machine shop that he owned. And we worked a lot of long hours, primarily doing like repair and fabrication work for the oil fields and all of that kind of stuff. It was long hours, and we weren't rich or anything, but my dad, he made enough money to give me and my mom and himself a very good, comfortable life. So because of those long working hours and the fact that my dad was born back in the 40s, he didn't really play video games, except for two exceptions. One, he occasionally played solitaire on his work computer whenever he had like a couple of minutes to himself and just kind of needed to shut his brain off for a minute. And the other game he occasionally played was with me, and that was Super Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo. And he was shockingly good at it. I think it was because his hands and fingers were so friggin' big that he could just use his thumb to hit the entire D-pad all at once, and he would just play Zangief and spam Zangief's jumping, spinning pile driver and just whoop my ass into the ground. But outside of those two exceptions, Dad never really played much of video games. And that's not to say he didn't like video games. He just never really had the time to sit down and learn how to play video games. But whenever he saw me playing one that captured his interest, he would sit down for probably like half an hour to an hour and actually watch me play them and ask a bunch of questions and stuff until life inevitably caught back up to us and he had to go do something else. But one of the best memories I have of playing, well, quote-unquote playing video games with my dad, and this is where my dad ties into giant robots. Back in the old PlayStation 2 eras, he watched me play one of the Armored Core games on the PlayStation 2, and I don't remember exactly which one it was, and it really doesn't matter all that much, but so my dad did what he did, asked a bunch of questions about the game, and learned that essentially the gameplay loop was go out on missions, make money, come back, buy parts, build a better robot. So once he understood that, and once I explained the many, many different like stat modifiers and stuff on the various parts of the Armored Cores, he decided he wanted to build one himself. So he actually went and got a calculator, a notepad, and a pen, and actually like went through all the parts, like crunched the numbers, and like plotted out the armored core that he wanted to build, which I might kind of actually have a picture of that armored core. Give me just a sec as I scroll through my screen captures here. Where is it? Ah, here it is. So this was my attempt at recreating the armored core that my dad built way back in the day, but this is an Armored Core 6, obviously. So, understanding that part of the game was to make as much money as possible, my dad went in and built out an armored core based on those principles. So, in his mind, correctly I believe, the best way to make money in a game like Armored Core was to eliminate the enemy as quickly as possible while expending as few resources as possible and taking as little damage as possible, preferably none. So, what my dad put together was an incredibly lightweight armored core with a very high output engines, energy generators, and energy-based weapons, because back then energy weapons just had to recharge. They didn't have to really reload and worry about ammo. So you can't really see it in this picture, but this armored core is rocking a very large laser cannon mounted on its right shoulder. It's essentially a highly mobile, lightweight sniping armored core. And you know what? It fucking worked beautifully. Like, me and my dad spent probably somewhere between like 6 and 8 hours going through everything and tailoring this armored core to be absolutely what my dad wanted it to be. It was, hands down, possibly the best gaming experience I've ever had, because I actually got to partner up with my dad and do something in video games cooperatively rather than competitively. It was very, 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 very cool. I treasure that memory to this day. But anyway, back to the Battle Mech I had on the screen. So, in Battle Mech, just like an Armored Core, I like, you know, kind of recapturing those memories I had with my dad. Like, figuring stuff out, putting mechs and stuff together, and seeing how they work. So, the other day, I didn't post this on YouTube, it was a Facebook thing, but I finally got my hands on a loader mech, and I went and built out this mech in the spirit of the enormous mobile OSHA violation of a forklift that we had in our old machine shop. And this thing was just, it was the fucking worst. Like, it would shut down or overheat if you so much as even fucking looked at this forklift wrong. So I tried to build the spirit of that forklift into this loader mech. So basically, I loaded it down with very high output, high heat energy weapons and as few heat sinks as I could possibly get away with. So this mech would just shut down if I fired the energy weapons in too quick a succession. It was so fucking silly. And you know what? It did exactly what it was supposed to do. That mech fucking sucked ass, and I love it for it. But then I came across this thing, which is a Corsair. And in Battletech lore, if I remember my research correctly after I found this fucking walking scrap heap, it's what's known as a Frankenmech, which is a mech that is built out of literally just whatever people on the periphery of the inner sphere could get their hands on to make a workable unit. And when I found this thing and looked at its stats and its loadout, it's like my dad from beyond the grave was telling me, like, hey, son, I appreciate all your designs. They're very good and all that, but let me show you what's really up. I essentially had to do nothing to this mech to bring it perfectly into line with something my dad would have built. Like, in real life, if someone had come to my dad's shop while he was still alive and said, here's an unlimited amount of funding, we need you to build us an enormous 95-ton, heavily armed and armored walking murder machine. And my dad would have built something like the Corsair. He would have gone out to all the local junkyards, collected whatever crap he needed, brought it back to the machine shop, and he would have put this together. And like I said, my mech builds are pretty good. They're pretty basic. I like the big heavy mechs with lots of armor, and preferably as many long-range missile launchers as I could stuff into the chassis. That is not what the Corsair is. The Corsair has an honestly psychotic amount of short-range firepower. It's currently rocking 4 AC-5 rapid-fire autocannons, 3 short-range missile launchers, and 2 medium lasers. And let me tell you, like, compared to the mechs I normally put together, dude, the Corsair fucking rips. It is so goddamn good at short range. It's almost unfair. Like, when I drop into a mission piloting the Corsair, I'll go toward whatever objective I'm doing, send my lance mates in first to kind of cause trouble before I can get into range myself, which is short range, and just light up whatever the fuck is in front of me. It's what my dad would have referred to as accuracy by volume of fire. And that essentially means shoot as much as you can, and eventually one of your shots is going to hit something. And that's exactly what the Corsair does. Like I said, 4 autocannons, 3 short-range missile launchers, 2 lasers. I'll occasionally use the lasers to engage at medium range if I need to, but if I can get point blank and keep my aim good enough, I have the missile launchers set to chain fire, so, firing one after another to keep up a constant barrage, but the autocannons are on linked fire, so they all fire at the same time, and they're rapid fire variants, so all of them fire very, very quickly. Like, the Corsair will fucking take down bigger and heavily armed mechs like they're nothing, which, granted, it's a 95-ton mech. There aren't actually that many bigger mechs than it. I think there's the Atlas, the Annihilator, and the King Crab are the only things currently in MechWarrior 5 that are heavier than the Corsair. That doesn't fucking matter. If I can get up close and just stuff all of my guns right up against the enemy's head, then that enemy just fucking melts immediately, and it is so much fun. And it suits my dad so incredibly well, because the other thing my dad liked, as much as watching me play video games that interest him, is he fucking loved action movies like Predator, Terminator 2, basically any Schwarzenegger movie that is like not a comedy. He also especially really loved World War II movies, so like Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, The Thin Red Line, any movie that has lots of gunfire and explosions and stories of heroism. My dad loved those movies to death. If he had still been around when that Brad Pitt movie Fury came out, which is also one of my favorite movies, he would have absolutely adored Fury. So now having a mech that is just so incredibly good at just firing lots of guns and making lots of explosions is so incredibly on brand for what my dad would have built. And I had to do basically nothing to the Corsair to make it exactly how my dad would have wanted to make it. I think I only had to replace 2 of the autocannons with rapid-fire autocannons, and that was really about it. Like, I know my dad would probably also like something bigger than an AC-5 on the mech, but, like, my own personal bias... Okay, let me explain real quick, for those who don't play MechWarrior 5, how weight balancing in MechWarrior 5 works. So, bigger guns are generally heavier guns. And you only have so much weight you can put on these mechs up to their maximum threshold, in this case of the Corsair, 95 tons. So having bigger guns means more weight, which means the mech can carry less ammo for those guns. So, like, say if I scaled up to an AC-20 for the autocannons instead of an AC-5, then yes, the guns would hit harder, but I would carry much less ammunition for the guns. And I tend to build my mechs for more longer, protracted engagements, so I like having lots of ammo on hand, rather than having just big guns I can only fire a few times before I then have to start relying on my energy weapons. So that's my own personal bias influencing that mech. If I can find a better balance of bigger guns to, still having enough ammo, I'll probably do that instead, because that's what my dad would have wanted. Because, there's 2 schools of shooting, according to him, for people that aren't very good shots, which is generally me, because I have poor eyesight and some nerve damage in my hands, so I'm never going to be a steady shot. And when my dad was teaching me to shoot, he said I had two options to get around that. One, which I already explained, accuracy by volume of fire, or two, shoot really, really, really big bullets. And normally I go in for the really big bullet approach, but yeah, I'm wandering off topic. Just bring it back. Like I said, I like having more ammo on hand rather than having bigger guns, at least as far as MechWarrior 5 goes. So, I don't know. In later days, I might try to rebalance the firepower on the Corsair. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll come back and make another video about it. But that's really all I had wanted to talk about today was, sharing my good memories of my dad and talking about MechWarrior, because if my dad were still around, we would still be hanging out playing MechWarrior 5 and building robots to this day. And just as bittersweet as that thought is, it's also a thought that makes me very happy because of the nostalgia I have of playing video games like Armored Core with my dad. So if you tuned in to listen to this video, and I guess technically watch since I actually showed more than one picture for once, shocker, I know, I really appreciate it. A like and a subscribe would also be appreciated. Put some comments down there sharing any fun video game experiences anyone who watched this video had with their parents or are still having with their parents, if you're fortunate enough to still have your parents around. I love hearing about stuff like that, like intergenerational bonding exercises over silly shit like building giant robots. Well, that's all. Thank you for watching and listening. See you on the next episode, and as always, have yourself a wonderful day.